Chan, thank you so much for volunteer your time with me, in particular, learning about teaching English as a second language. The
You're
reason,
welcome.
yeah, the reason I chose you because you're just so fascinated. I've been working with you for how long now? For
Oh
5 years?
gosh. At least, at
Yeah,
least.
yes, but you're just amazing.
Thank you.
And your background that you brought to the surface for our student, from your experience, it's just really rich. I
Thank
thought
you.
I'm
Thank
the
you.
best, but you beat me up. What can I say?
Well, take one to know one, no? Just kidding.
Exactly. Yes. It will be recorded, and I will use your story to teach so many people, especially educator in the US and educator in Thailand as well.
Sure.
Okay. So welcome to episode 3 with Chance, educator, and her background in teaching English as a second language. Go ahead.
Okay. I was born in Madagascar due to my family that immigrate from during the Chinese War, end up in Madagascar. So that's where my parents built their family. I was born in Madagascar, and then I moved. My dad wanted my sister to learn Chinese, but when it's time to come, my sister said, "No, I'm not going." So here I come, and so I'll go. So I end up at the age of 8. I traveled to Hong Kong to live with my uncle and aunt. So I registered into elementary school and then high school. I lived in Hong Kong till I graduated from high school and then worked for a couple of years. Didn't know what I wanted to do, so I worked for about a year or 2 years that at McDonald's. So that's one spot that I picked up some English here and there, but was not fluent enough that like I'm talking to you now. So after working for a couple of years, then I decide, my cousin and I decide, let's go see where we can go explore. So we decided to come to the US. At that time, we went to a community college in Yakima. And that's where I finished my AA degree. And then I transferred to Western Washington University and finished my 4-year degree with business administration. One of the reason that one way to force, I was put in a situation at the community college that there were no other Chinese student there. So I was in a way forced to use the language to and so I can navigate my daily life. So that's how my English was improved, and I was able to emerge in the culture that learn the how international's student life is and how to navigate and learn the to survive in a way.
Mhm.
So that's how my English got better. And on top of that too is I lived with a host family that was a German family, but um, everything was done English at home. So that's how I got better with in my language oral skill. Uh, and then after that, after graduate from Western, I worked and then worked for over probably about 10 to 15 years. I worked with at the beginning. I worked for a fast food restaurant, and then I worked with another coffee shop that I've been with them for over 20 years. So that's where that. And then as I move on, I always have the passion for language, and also I want to use my own experience while I was learning the language to help other students that come uh, to the U.S. So that's when I decide at the age of 60, I decide to go back to study my to teach English as a second language at the TESOL program at the Gonzaga University. So that took me about 2 years. Since I haven't been in school for so long, I decided to take only one class at a time, so I won't be too stressful. So I finally finished after a couple of years. So and a few years later, I moved up here to Everett,
Uh,
and that's how I end up here.
Yeah,
It was
well,
a good choice.
we so lucky to have you. And
Thank you.
your story is very eye-opening for me because you have that experience that so rich, not just in language, but in culture. And your journey can actually be in the movie because, with your dynamic and your identity is actually making the whole story of learning English that you learn is more fascinated. So one other thing you mentioned that the first exposure that you have in terms of conversational English that you learn is start off in McDonald's, right?
Very much so. Yes, 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 yes. Because the store that we had is located right central downtown in Hong Kong, and that's where mostly are the tourists come. And we had like the store it's a 3 level, so it's the revenue generates so much that and all the tourists that come in give you that opportunity to interact and might not be in a long conversation, but we had to get used to listen
Right.
the English language. I think that does help, and also with that being, I was being born in Madagascar too. I have a little bit of the French, English. I mean French language. So with that, gave me the skill to the what we call the transfer skill that to use to learn another language. So I think with the French, I think it did help me acquire the English language. Yeah, definitely.
Right. What about the structural linguistic? Because, a lot of us as a child, especially in the Asian culture, we
Mm-hmm.
tend to have that structural cap, right? The vocabulary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
First year,
Yeah,
right?
and I think though, I think that's one of the things that I remember when I was in Hong Kong to get to take my TOEFL, and here I am taking a dictionary, and I'm gonna learn every single word, start from and then. But thing is, we can memorize, but when it comes to the real test, is we don't really contextualizing the word that we miss the meaning.
Right.
And so I think is especially when you're learning language, contextualizing the language, I think is really important because most of our students, they might not, for example, a broom, they might not know how to call the broom in English, but they know it in their language. So when we put those two, contextualizing that vocabulary in their daily life, I think that will make a big difference because, and also using pictures, and I think that is really one way to help student, especially student that really illiterate, because pictures or object we can show and tell type thing. I think that's really, especially for a beginner student, that is really helpful. Yeah.
Right. So with this episode, our focus is about interlanguage, right? The method of interlanguage. So when do you notice that you actually incorporate your interlanguage into your speech or even your writing in English?
Actually, I think I do a lot more with the speech part, because when I even though when I talk to my friends, my relative, or I call my parents on the weekend, I notice myself that I will use Chinese, French, or Malagasy in between, and like vocabulary type, because what I'm trying to do is trying to explain what trying to tell them, or when my sister or my parents will answer me in the same way too. So I think is the code switching part is, I think it's one of those that we use on a daily basis, really. So just to explain things to student or to our friends that because I think sometimes it's, if you have the same group of friends or student that speak the same, they have the same native language, and sometimes if they it's easier just to say the word in the native language and go back to your carry on your conversation.
Mhm.
And I think that's, sometimes it's just like I think sometimes you don't even know you're doing that in and out, you just
Mhm.
do it.
For
So
me, your interlanguage is completely different from me. What I
Mm-hmm.
have noticed, when you had a conversation on the phone with your family, you switch coding. I never
Mm-hmm.
did anything like that in my
Mm-hmm.
entire career as, as a language learner. So for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
like an aha moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so with the next question that I have for you, do you like to speak and write in your native language?
I don't know if I could say, well, I haven't used my, too sad, but I haven't really used uh written uh characters for so long that I'm very rusty.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
I
you
know
talk
the
in
basic
Cantonese, right?
that
Cantonese.
the Chinese language is with
Mhm.
characters. So I know some of the basic characters I know, but when it comes to writing a paragraph or anything like that, no. And
Okay,
then it's unfortunate. Yeah.
right. So any moment in time, especially in life, when you actually learn other language, that you start feeling appreciate that being bilingual or multilingual.
Just one recently when I was on my way home from my travel visiting my family, I had a really tight connection. So when we got to where area that we have to have your passport, the immigration, and so we come in and we have two lane. One lane they have a real person checking your passport and all that. Another lanes are self-serve, and then both lane the self-serve one is very long. And so both my husband said, well, let's go to the short lane. So we weren't sure. So I was using my broken French to say, well, find out, is this the right lane? Is this the right lane to go through customs so I can go to the next building? So they were, even though it wasn't a complete sentences, but I was able to give them the key information they
Uh-huh.
need to understand. Might be with an accent, but they knew. So I knew I was in the right lane. So went through. We made our connection, but it was very and I think in a situation like that, I didn't even really care if I said it if my pronunciation is correct or for my sentence is complete. I just want to ask I just gave him the word that I needed to know for him to just say yes or no.
Right.
And so, sometimes I think, especially when with the global, people start traveling, I think a lot of people are doing that too.
Right.
So, but yeah.
I heard you mention about accents, and accents is always just a big, conversation when we talk about language learner.
Mhm,
So can
mhm.
you tell me a little bit more of what word accents really mean to you?
The accent for me, I think I've been here for 40 years in the US. I still, people will come in and say, when, oh, God, your English is very good. But for me is accent, it doesn't really matter to me. That's just, as long as I'm understood and I can express, I think the accent is part of our identity really.
You,
And so as far as, accent people, because you have students come in and say, I want to learn English and practice because I can lose my accents. You're not going to lose that. You're not going to lose that unless you are born and raised in the US, if you want to, whatever the country that,
Mhm.
you're from. But I think the accent, I think it's not bad.
Yeah,
It's
well,
not
you
a bad thing.
right, right. Your identities as, as a person from multiple backgrounds very strong. And I can tell that you really appreciate your accent. But there's a time that, a group of us, people that learn
Mm-hmm.
English as a second language, really
Mm-hmm.
conscious about our accent and sometimes think it's a
Mm-hmm.
shame. Do you have a moment in life that you have that you feel like, oh my God, my accent is just a shame?
Ah, I don't know if I don't think I really had a situation that I feel like ashamed, but I would just feel like awkward in a way because sometimes, like, when I come to like certain thing, if I can't say it, and I will say it and I repeat it, and maybe I will ask the other person that I'm talking to is like, did you understand what I'm saying? Because I think sometimes there's nothing you can really control really your accent. You have an accent, you have the accent.
Mhm.
And the only thing that you, I think the most important thing is if you're being understood. And I think that, or you can, if you can express your ideas, or I think that's more important than the accent. I think, and then it's hard. I think it's sometimes it's hard to teach student to embrace that,
Mhm.
you know. And I'm sure when you have this when people listening to this conversation that we're having now, they
Mhm.
probably say, oh yeah, she has accent.
Mhm.
So what?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Accent.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So the last question that I have for you, I don't want to take too much time now, is a little bit personal, but I think it's going to really open up so many listener eyes, especially you going to scale yourself 1 to 10 on your ability of using your English language. So if you can give yourself a scale 1 to 10 of using your English language in the category number 1, speaking English.
10.
10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Writing English.
9.5.
Okay. 9.5.
Uh-huh.
Reading English.
10.
Okay. You're pretty confident, Jan.
I
Okay.
think with the I with the language too, I think all my life I think I've been here. And
I'm
I'm
just
still, you
being
know,
bad.
but I'm still learning as I go.
Mhm.
And that's it. It's not, well, it's not a period. It's a
Right.
journey that, you know, I constantly
Mhm.
learning.
Right.
And that's the fun thing
Right.
about the learning a language, period.
Right. So the last thing is conversational English, especially in
Mm-hmm.
formal setting or business
Mm-hmm.
setting.
Mm-hmm.
Scale 1 to 10, formal setting and business setting, conversational.
And I think it all depends on my environment, because, you know, if I am not in a setting that I'm comfortable to talk about, like let's say if you're in a boardroom talk about IT, that's not my I'm not very familiar with that topic. I would say
Okay.
probably 4 or 5.
So it depends on the
It
context.
depends on the content and depends on where the environment is, because, you know, if you can if you can put me in an environment that, well, let's have in a board meeting that we talk about content with the ESL, I
Mhm.
feel comfortable with that. But
Right.
if you want to put me in a topic that I'm not very comfortable, like with technology or anything like engineering and anything like that, I probably feel, oh, what do I need to talk about? Because I don't really know
Mhm.
the the content.
Right. So if you can give a listener or student that in my teaching English as a single language class, like 3 suggestion of like somebody that will teach English to a second language L2, what would be some
Mm-hmm.
suggestion if the L1 is teaching the L2?
Okay. Okay. First of all, is learn and get to know your student. Find out their goals. What are their goals learning English?
Mhm.
And the skill level.
Mhm.
Because sometimes we are assuming students have the same goal, but that's not true.
Mhm.
Or sometimes we go into the classroom, they might be all in the same classroom, but some student might have a higher level from prior education. Uh, some student might not have education even with their own language. So there's a different skill level there that, so as a prospective
Mhm.
instructor, you wanna find out your student level, what are their goals are, and you select content that relevant to them, instead of telling, okay, today we're going to learn this and you're going to learn this.
Mhm.
If they don't, if the content is not relevant to your student, they're not going to pay any attention. They don't really care. So I think that those are the 3 things really, really, and create an environment that they feel safe to learn.
Right. Right.
Everybody make mistakes, doesn't, regardless if it's regardless, how you're going to run the classroom, student needs to feel comfortable and safe.
Mhm.
in a learning environment.
What about somebody that, particularly as student, what would be suggestion on language learner? How
What do
to,
you,
like,
what do
suggestion to, for example, if like a student, for example, they want
oh,
to
for
be better.
students?
Yeah, they want to
For
be better
student?
in English. So what would be some tips, that came from you because you are a language learner, right?
Uh,
So what would be a tips to our
I
student?
think the key thing is don't afraid to ask question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, because if I have the same question, your other student might have the same question. So don't be afraid to ask question. And also don't be afraid to immerse yourself into the with your classmate. That's how you get better.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think it's nature, if we have 4 or 5 students came from the same country, we tend to congregate together. And it's awkward to speak English if you all speak the same language.
Right.
So I think it's really important to let our student know that go out and find another student from your school or from other class that speak the find a native speaker to practice, because that's how you get better.
Mm-hmm.
And also don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's the key. And also resources. There are many resources out there that you can find and it's for free. And I think that's the and give yourself credit, because when you think about it, how many students that already have no one native language and learning a different language. So I think sometimes we have to give ourselves a break that okay, I'm learning a different language here. So, it's got to take time, and it takes time. You can't just come in and say, well, I'm gonna learn English and tomorrow I'm gonna be perfect. No, myself, the same thing. Sometimes, even grammar, I will catch myself when I try in Chinese language. We don't have, for example, for he and she, we don't have he and she. We just use the same characters,
Mm-hmm.
unless if it's written.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, so when I talk, sometimes I will tend to what I'm trying to say, explain to someone that he, but I will use the she. But
Right.
then I will
Mm-hmm.
catch myself. And then I have to correct myself. Okay, what I meant is she. So
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the things that if you catch your own mistakes, that means that you know it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
we spent a chunk of time together learning, not just
Mhm.
to learning English and teaching English principle as well.
Exactly.
Give ourselves enough credit when we learn second, third, fourth, fifth language. We want
That's
it to be
exactly.
perfect, but hard on ourselves, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. We gotta give
anyway,
yourself credits.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for
You're
being with
welcome.
me in my podcast. Well, stick around, or if you come back again for another, but for another episode. Anyway, thank you so much, Chan.
You're welcome.